Okay, so thanks, Tim. As Tim mentioned, we're going to be talking to you this afternoon about mobile identity and in particular authenticating the communication channel between brands and enterprises. I thought I may as well just mention that apparently Boris Johnson is doing a press conference starting right now. And I just wanted to say to you and the guys in the room and anyone online from the UK, it will come back on in the 6 o'clock news and hopefully the message will be a lot more coherent up here, so stay with us for now. Okay. So I wanted to start just taking a little trip back down memory lane for a moment, if you'll allow me. Now, I suspect, along with a lot of you, that I've been in the digital industry for, well, since actually I had a full head of hair, to be honest. But one of the biggest challenges that we've always faced in the digital industry is customer adoption. So for many years, I was working with mobile operators around the world, talking to them about how we can create these amazing self-care apps. And this was going to be the complete future of customer engagement, where customers would download the app and they can do absolutely everything from this amazing personalized app. And what we found is, yes, certainly there was uptake there, but there seemed to be a stubborn proportion of the customer base who just wouldn't adopt this kind of technology. And that's something that we've seen consistently with all sorts of digital products and services. That, of course, you have early adopters, you have people that will engage with the products, and you'll have a subset of people who just will not use them, whatever you want to do. So, we had these incredible apps where you could manage your entire account, but yet we still had people going into a store, queuing for half an hour at lunchtime because they wanted to change their tariff, right? And we just couldn't get across that stumbling block. And one of the few good things that's come out of this terrible COVID pandemic is that there's a huge shift in customer behavior. So we all talk about digital transformation. Our previous guest talked about not liking analysis from McKinsey, which is a shame because I've got a few bits here. But one of the things that they talk about is that there's been a 7-year leap in digital transformation from a consumer perspective in the first 12 months of COVID. So 7 years of progress, if you like, in terms of digital transformation. And I thought we'll start off with just a little straw poll of those of you in the room, just to get you thinking about this. And I wonder how many of you have either done something new yourselves online or in a digital way since COVID, or, seeing as we're all pretty digital savvy, know somebody, maybe a member of your family, who's done something new online, whether that's shopping online for the first time, whether it's joining video conferences, joining Zoom calls, something new online. Can we have a raising of hands? Okay, so that's a good proportion of you. Well, what we're seeing here is what I think is some really incredible data from McKinsey, which looks at customers who've tried new shopping behaviors since COVID-19. What's really quite stunning, I think, is if you look at the emerging markets here, and hopefully you can all see that, yes you can. So in these emerging markets, India, Indonesia, and even China, you're seeing almost 100% of respondents are saying that they have tried new shopping behaviors since COVID-19. And I guess if you think about it, in emerging markets, you might say, well, yeah, that's kind of obvious. But what I found really interesting here is looking at countries like the US, the UK, Europe, where consistently across the board, you're seeing 50% plus of people saying that they've tried new shopping behaviors since COVID-19. And even more importantly, look at the intent to continue on the right-hand side here. So what you're seeing is roughly 80% of people who have done something new are saying that they will continue with that new behavior post-COVID. And our next slide here talks about the intent to do more digitally and more online post-COVID. And just to give you a quick view here, unfortunately you can't actually see that very well here on the screen, but basically everything that's in white, in this colour here, or I guess you'd call that teal, would you? Everything that's coloured in there is showing a significant increase in propensity to transact digitally online. So really, the only things here where you're seeing a reduction, where people are saying, actually, after COVID, I will do less online, are in those grey boxes there. Everything else on this screen, across all of these different countries and all of these different types of behaviour, are saying we are going to continue doing more post-COVID. And mobile, as one of our previous speakers mentioned, mobile is really at the centre of this shift online. So what you can see here is if you look at the global statistics, so globally in 2019, 63% of all internet visits were via a mobile device. And in 2020, that's grown to 68%. And of course, that's just going to continue growing. And I think one of the really interesting things here to note is that we're not just talking about e-commerce. So we're talking about all means of digital transactions, all means of a digital life. So banking, food, delivery, entertainment, shopping, even travel. There's this tremendous shift towards digital. And it really is, I guess you could say it's a once-in-a-generation shift. So for us, all of us in digital, this is really great news, right? We've got all of these people now being used to transacting digitally. And of course, these are all the people from an omni-channel messaging perspective. These are all the people that we are going to be communicating with, right? So what does this mean for all of us? Well, essentially, it's the new normal, a phrase that we've all heard a lot. There's two groups, as I like to think of it, of users. There's the users who are already digitally savvy, the users that were already using digital products and services every day. And those people are simply doing even more online. But you've also got a large group, particularly in emerging markets, but also here in the UK, of net new digital users. So these are people that simply, for whatever reason, didn't start using, weren't communicating digitally, weren't using online services. So we've got more digital conversations, more net new digital users. We've got new use cases. So all of us, whether we knew it or not, have started to use e-education somewhere in our family, right? Whether it's our kids or nephew, whatever, right? We're using e-health, and we're seeing this also all around the world. That's giving us new opportunities for intelligent and automated customer experience. So whether that's through omni-channel messaging, or whether it's through automated customer experience, chatbots, etc. We're seeing a reduction in sales and customer care costs because of this shift online, and we're seeing, most importantly, a growth in top-line digital revenues and average spend. So this is all good news for anyone involved in a digital business, right? So whether you're in the audience today, whether you're from an enterprise that is enjoying more transactions from your customers, whether you're from a messaging company that is sending more communications and bringing more conversational commerce online, this is all good news. But something that's also changed is customer expectations. So 92% of customers are now expecting our brands, our enterprises, to keep them and other customers safe. And what I find amazing, 55% of consumers want companies to keep their data safe as a number one priority when they're engaging with an enterprise. And I think this is really interesting because it talks a little bit to the blame game. If you think about a consumer, if somebody walks out of their house and leaves their door wide open and leaves their brand new tablet sitting there on the doorstep, walks out, doesn't put the alarm on, walks away, comes back to find it's been stolen, they're not going to blame the locksmith, they're not going to blame the alarm company. They made a mistake, right? But in a digital world, if they make a mistake, if they put all of their information out on social media, if they manage to tell somebody on social media what their mother's maiden name is or what the name of their first pet is, and then they get social engineered, and then somebody gives them a call and says, hey, this is the bank, and you're going to receive a text message with a PIN code, please give it to me when you receive it. They do all of that. They become the victim of fraud, and they blame the bank, or they blame the enterprise. So there's that expectation that we have to protect the customer, that when they're doing something digital, it's somebody else's problem, and that other person has to step up and provide the security. And here is our real challenge. So we've seen a huge increase in digital transactions, and that inevitably leads to an increase in fraudulent activity, okay? So I don't know if you've thought about this, but criminals were also in lockdown all over the world, right? These people who would perpetrate in-person fraud, in-person scams, right? Even the guys who are walking around pickpocketing, suddenly their livelihood's gone. So what are they doing? They're moving online. And you see that in some of these numbers here, okay? We've seen, as you probably know, people in banks and card companies don't like to talk too much about fraud in an open environment, but we know that one senior fraud management exec at a global card processor has seen almost a 35% increase in fraud in 2020 as opposed to 2019. 35% in 1 year. TransUnion, the global credit agency, 46% increase between 2020 and 2021 in fraudulent digital transaction attempts, 46% in 1 year. And if you look at the bottom graph here, you see fraud cost contributed by the mobile channel, and you can see how that was already growing very significantly, but look at the difference between 2020 and 2021. So the fraudsters are attacking, they're attacking using the mobile channel, they're attacking the net new users, and they're looking for vulnerabilities wherever they can find them. And in particular, and what we're going to talk about is identity theft, and Glyn from Telefonica will talk a little bit about that with us. So if we look at identity theft, reported identity theft in the US doubled last year, and the Global Association of Fraud Examiners are talking about really significant increases, you can see that here, in identity theft, both observed and expected around the world. So we know that there's a problem, okay? We've got all these new users, it's great news, but there's a problem with fraud and we've got to do something about it. What do we mean by identity theft? So I won't go into the details, I think you all understand it, but phishing, vishing, common theft, hacking, data breaches. The idea is that the fraudster gets information on the victim through any of these means and then uses that information to either open new accounts in that person's name or takes over existing accounts. So what are we going to do about it? And here's a big dilemma, security versus customer experience, okay? So from a security perspective, we can probably stop a lot of this fraud, right? We can build cast iron gates around the customer experience that will deter and probably stop the fraudster. But the problem is, if you do that, you affect the customer experience. And what you end up doing is not just keeping out the fraudster, but keeping out your customer, which is clearly a problem for us. So getting on to exactly what Glyn and I want to talk about today is how telcos can play a role in securing that omni-channel communication. So if you think about telcos, they've got a wealth of information, and Glyn will talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment. But all of this information that can secure the channel between the consumer and the enterprise. Telcos have some of the highest levels of trust in any enterprise. They have massive reach. And of course, much of the communication that's happening, both valid communication and fraudulent communication, is happening by definition over the mobile channel. So telcos are at the heart of this. So what does that mean? What are they offering? What can they do? Oh, okay. All right. There we go. I'll do my best. So there are generally three buckets of products that are offered by mobile operators. They focus on the top of the Venn diagram, they focus on fraud and reducing fraud. They focus on authentication, so how to authenticate the user, and they focus on customer experience, how to improve the customer experience. And the actual products themselves, if you look at fraud, so you have account tenure. So account tenure lets you know how long the customer has been a customer of the operator. A lot of fraud happens with brand new SIM cards. Number recycle lets you know if the number clearly has been recycled and given to a new user. Roaming is obvious, location is obvious. Account takeover protection, Glyn will talk about in a moment with SIM swap. You've then got authentication products, so KYC match, seamless authentication, again Glyn's going to talk to you about it, and age, so how old is the customer. So all of these products can be accessed via companies like Infobit, where through means of a simple API integration, the enterprise can call in real time these products and resolve this information. And what's absolutely critical is that this is done in the background, okay? So this is not something that affects the customer experience. And this really talks to why enterprises are looking for mobile operator data. So it's always on, phone is always with the customer, it's heavily regulated, it's unique. A lot of this data is just simply not available from anywhere else. And again, I think most importantly is it's invisible. It can run in the background without affecting customer experience. At that point, I guess I'll hand over to Glyn, who's going to talk, I think, in a little more detail. One final thing to say from me, though, is that whether you're a messaging company, whether you're an enterprise looking to secure the channel, come and talk to us. We'd love to have a discussion with you about how we can use these types of products and services. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are you going to go up or are you going to...
Thanks, Sham. So Glyn Povar, so I work in Telefonica. Been with Telefonica for actually probably about 18 years now. Spent quite a few years in O2, but now I work in Telefonica Group, in Telefonica Tech, which is our global big data and IoT business. We're working very closely with our operating businesses here in the UK, with Virgin Media O2, but also in Spain, Germany, Brazil, and the other businesses. So, covering all those different geographies, we're probably looking after over 300 million subscribers. And of course, we've talked about it a lot today, but consumers are a really relevant, part of that business, of course, because they are the mobile subscribers, they're the ones that pay the bills, they're the ones that consume our services either on a B2C level or a B2B level, with some of the products that we've seen today. But, I think the businesses that we built in the last years, and one of the businesses that I started in around 2016 when I was just moving from O2 into Telefonica was looking at, identity theft and account takeovers and how that happens with mobile channels and mobile products. And, SMS was a really good example, or even voice, where we saw, SIM swap attacks happening on two-factor authentication SMSs or two-factor authentication voice codes. And we started working with one of the large UK banks who asked us, could we develop a product, effectively a risk signal that would, via an API, allow them to understand the relative risk of sending a one-time passcode via SMS or voice, either channel. And we decided actually we could develop this product in our network and create an API and, in turn, create a risk signal effectively that would allow enterprises and aggregators to make decisions about, when to use our channels or when to use other kind of step-up authentication mechanisms when they were engaging with their customers, either for, account setups or mobile app registrations, which is a very common use case today, or just the common one-time passcode via SMS. So that's today a really big business for us actually. I think we're probably seeing over 100 million SIM swap checks just in one country in the UK per annum, and if we take that together with our other operators, Vodafone, Three, and BTE, you're probably looking at 500 million. Across, what is obviously a very large number of SMS OTPs that are being sent by various different enterprises, whether that's financial services or it's gig economy or, e-commerce, huge number of messages and in some cases voice OTPs being sent. So I think, we see our role today in this, what is a very nascent business for Telefonica and also the other telcos, as a journey that we've really just started, because we want to protect our consumer channels. We want to invest and create new enterprise businesses so we can understand and identify opportunities with really big enterprise customers, whether it's financial services or any other vertical for that matter. And we want to do it in a way that's going to be regulator friendly, I guess, because we are a regulated entity. So we have a role to protect consumer data and obviously comply with the relevant laws where we operate, but also, we're very keen to over comply with data protection laws. So, things like data minimization are very close to our hearts. We're not about, just selling our customers data. I think it's a point of differentiation that's been really close to our chairman's heart in Telefonica. So we're not going down the sort of Google route. We're probably, trying to stay closer to the Apple route, if that makes sense, in terms of customer privacy. And so, we're looking at, I guess, at the future of how we can really open up via new APIs, risk signals, if you like, in today's attributes business. But I guess in the future, we're going to be thinking about, machine learning models as kind of the second step. Can we take data points that we can see in the network in real time, put them together and create scores that we can share with enterprises to help them manage risks, throughout the customer lifecycle, whether it's, customer sign up, whether it's customer logging in or customer transacting. And then, there's obviously the third evolution that may be coming, which is around, self-sovereign identity and customers owning their own identity and using their own identity, within their own identity wallet on their smartphone, and, using that with whichever relying parties or enterprises they want to use their identity with. And, we see many roles for operators in that ecosystem too, but that's obviously a way away, I guess. But that's kind of where we are today. So really early days, but I think we're looking to play a leading role in kind of digital identity, protecting our networks, protecting our customers, and protecting the enterprises that we do business with.
Great. Okay. Well, we've only got a few more minutes left because you've both spoken so eloquently. I'm going to ask some quick-fire questions. So, Glyn, just some stupid questions, because I like asking stupid questions. You're talking about rolling out these services, these authentication services and identification services. Presumably the brands that you're working with, they can only check their Telefonica customers through those. So what about all the other customers? What happened to things like Mobile Connect, where all the operators in the world were going to introduce a single system for identification? Why hasn't that worked, and why can't something like that work?
I think, Mobile Connect, obviously GSMA created Mobile Connect some time ago, maybe, was it 10 years ago now, probably. I think, the idea was definitely right. It was quite a technology-led program, in my opinion, which generally, I think don't take into account business needs, right, or even consumer needs. Maybe it over-egged the privacy point. But, it didn't quite work at that time. But I think it was right in the way that it was about getting operators together. It was right in the way that we needed to create an ecosystem. It was right about the way we needed to actually make APIs available that covered, basically the planet, right, the globe. We need, the enterprises that buy our products today want to have, access effectively to 6 billion subscribers via one API. Of course, that's not the reality today, but we're actually a long way along that journey, actually. I think, between Vodafone and ourselves in Europe, you can access nearly 250 million subscribers, right, for the majority of our services. And that's a massive leap forward from, where we were 5 years ago even. Okay, so
Glyn, you talked earlier about personal data and working with regulators and so on. So I'm going to come back to Sham. When you're working with PII, what are some of the big issues around personal data that you have to be wary of?
Yeah, great question. I think there's two sides to that. So one of them is this concept of legitimate interest. So one of the products that Glyn was talking about is SIM swap. So SIM swap looks for, has a SIM been swapped within a given time frame. Now that is used to protect against account takeover fraud. And so certainly in the UK, but I think in most of Europe and certainly most of the world, there's this legal concept of legitimate interest, which means the operators can share this data with an enterprise if the enterprise is looking to protect the consumer. So that's one answer. So if it's about protection, then you don't need to worry about PII. About SIM swap. Yeah. In terms of PII, whenever you're going to share PII, it's simply a case of taking consent. So the enterprise needs to take the consent of the end user, which they often do. So it's one of those tick boxes in the flow. So it's critical, though, that they understand that and they take consent.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you talk about regulation, but it depends which regulators you're talking about. Some regulators want you to protect your customers and stop you moving data. Competition regulators might make it easier for you to move your data. So, as this industry grows, I think we're going to see some interesting tensions there. To come back to you, Shyam, Glyn sort of mentioned some use cases. Can you talk about any more sort of real-world applications of using mobile as an identity?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty. I mean, Glyn can probably talk to that.
To give one example, I know flash calling is being talked about today and kind of seamless authentication. Well, we have a seamless authentication product in market in the UK across all the 4 operators called Number Verify. Number Verify is a simple API service that lets you do, as an enterprise, seamless authentication effectively. So you can embed it into your app via an SDK, via some of our partners, some of them whom we've represented here, and effectively make a seamless experience for onboarding a customer in your mobile app, whether it's eBay or one of the banks, or Amazon or ASOS or any of these enterprises. You can actually, as long as you capture the customer's mobile number, you can actually authenticate that number via the mobile network, via the SIM card, so it's cryptographically secure in less than 3 seconds, without any SMS OTPs, without any flash calling, without any of this kind of friction or security risks. And that's something that's already being used today by two of the leading UK banks for their mobile app registration processes, unbeknownst to the customer, in a very, very secure, seamless and customer-friendly way.
What do you make of the whole idea of federated digital identity, where you have, your bank, your mobile operator, the government, they're all contributing to this kind of cloud-based version of me, and then I'm just kind of going in and picking out the bits that I need to show to whoever I'm trying to prove something about me to? Do you think that operators will become part of that federated identity play, or do you think they want to kind of try and own it a bit more?
Well, I mean, I think if you ask me, I think other people in Telefonica might have a different opinion, but okay. We've always wanted to own things, right, as operators, and I think governments have always wanted to own things, and clearly the thrust of the self-sovereign identity proponents and ecosystem is all about reversing that trend and making sure that consumers own their own identity. And I think, I've taken a more balanced view that we're on that journey, and it might take 10, 15, 20 years to get there. And actually, a lot of consumers aren't actually interested in owning their own identity. They're too busy. They don't want to have a mobile wallet. They don't want to assert their identity or their verifiable credential. So we've got to find a way of making it easy for them to engage with this new world. And in the meantime, we're going to evolve our products, I think, towards that. And, I think we're not necessarily want to be owners of customers' data, but we're happy to take services to market that can protect and defend their digital identity in the meantime, while we see how that ecosystem develops.
Yeah, well, it's still very early days, isn't it? So is there a quick question before we go to the break? Probably the fact that I've said let's go to a break means that there won't be any questions. But, okay. Well, look, we're going to go for a half-hour break now, but before we do, I'm going to thank Shyam and Glyn for all of their comments, and we'll see you in half an hour. Thank you.